When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him?" The women had a purpose of going to the tomb that morning. Their purpose was to finalize the preparation of the body of Jesus for his final burial. They knew that his body hastily had been placed in the tomb the prior evening. They knew that Joseph had wanted to bury his body prior to the Sabbath, which had been quickly approaching. Now it was the morning following the Sabbath, and the women are finding their way to the grave which held their dear friend. They wondered about how they would move the large stone that covered the entrance of the tomb. They had the spices. They had the devotion. They had the willingness to demonstrate this final act of love for their teacher, but one thing was on their mind. Who will roll away the stone? I can only imagine the massive stone that covered the mouth of this tomb. We often think of it as a carefully hewn rock which was methodically rolled into place. However, maybe it was just a large boulder that had been wrestled to cover the mouth of the tomb. I don't know what this stone looked like or how it got into place, but the women were concerned that it would keep them from the body. It was the obstacle keeping them from Jesus. Are there obstacles keeping us from Jesus? Do we ever wish that someone would roll away those stones that keep us away from Christ? Do we sometimes wonder how the day will turn out or how things will turn out as we go on our journey? Do others put obstacles in our way, or do we try to do our best and work around the obstacles rather than letting God move them? The women had a concern with the stone, and it appears that they gave no thought to anything else except what was on their mind. Who would roll away the stone? The fact that God had a different plan apparently had not entered their mind. We could question these women's trust. Couldn't they see all the signs and understand the words that Jesus had told them? Where was their faith? It could be easy to question their faith, but it would be wrong and would not portray the true experiences of these early disciples. It had only been a few days since they had seen their beaten, blood-soaked friend nailed to the cross. The animus of hostility shown by the Romans and Jews towards Jesus was quite evident. The fear of some was that this anger toward the teacher might spill over into retribution against his followers as well. The deep and abiding faith of these women is evident as they traveled to the tomb. They knew the climate of the city, yet they took the risk to lovingly carry out all they could now do. With all this going on, there was still the one daunting question: who would roll away the stone? Sometimes in our lives, we can't see the blessings because of the terrain that surrounds us. Our minds are drawn to the issues that plague us rather than the answers that are just around the corner. Like the women, we sometimes concern ourselves with those things that are of no concern. As they approached the tomb, it was already open. They were concerned about that which was not there. We do the same thing sometimes. We trust in our eyes and not in our God. On that morning, as they made their way to the tomb, they had one question, but it was the wrong question because it was no longer valid. The tomb was empty, the Savior had risen, and life would never be the same. The spices that they had purchased and carried were no longer needed. Now there was a new question. Where was his body? We once again have the blessings of seeing things through the lens of history. We recognize things because of the time that has passed, but in the moment, when the world is spinning so quickly, we, like the women, sometimes don't see God's plan. It is often only after we have seen how things develop and turn out that we recognize the hand of God at work in our lives. It is interesting that the women were told, "Don't be alarmed." That can also be translated, "Don't be astounded," or "Don't be amazed." You see, all these translations bring to bear a reminder about God. He can do more than we are able to imagine. The women did not imagine the empty tomb. The women did not imagine the stone having been rolled away. The women did not imagine the risen Lord. Yet it all happened, and their lives were from that day forward different. The risen Savior made a difference for them, and he makes a difference for us today. We may not be able to imagine all the things God is doing in our lives, but rest assured, he is at work because Jesus is risen. Have a blessed and happy Easter.